Almost a century ago, one of the world's richest men spent millions to create an American town in the middle of the Amazon jungle. Today, much of Henry Ford's dream lies in ruins. Fordlandia, as it became known, once had a state-of-the-art hospital, fine homes and even a golf course.
Você imagina que você vai ter uma cidade com iluminação elétrica na Amazônia.
Even today, Fordlandia can be hard to reach. Endless forest, and then you see it. A vast water tower and a rotting industrial complex. From another world and another time. But this is no ghost town. Ford's legacy lives on in the people still here. So what was Henry Ford trying to achieve, and why the Amazon? And can Fordlandia be saved before the forest finally reclaims it?
In so many ways, Henry Ford was a simple man.
But by the 1920s, Ford was also incredibly rich. His cars, factories and company towns had transformed the way Americans worked and lived. Every piece of his iconic Model T came from a Ford-operated business. But there was just one link in the supply chain missing: rubber. At the time, most rubber came from plantations in Asia. Ford saw a solution in the Amazon, the native home of the rubber tree. In 1927, he acquired 2.5 million acres of land on the banks of one of the Amazon's largest rivers, the Tapajos. That's a piece of land nearly the size of Jamaica. The plan was to grow and export enough rubber to make the tires for 2 million cars a year.
And the volume of production will increase as rubber becomes available from Ford-owned plantations on the Amazon.
The first teams began to arrive by boat in 1928. Newspapers at the time painted a picture of heroic adventure and discovery, and of Ford as imperious, beginning the most spectacular project of his long, spectacular career. Ford's vision was of a little piece of old-town America in the heart of Brazil, combined with all the industrial efficiency of his Detroit factories. He hired mostly local Brazilians to clear the forest. By 1929, there were around 1,300 local workers on the payroll. But it wasn't long before reality began to bite. Mud, oppressive heat, and disease very soon took their toll. 90 people had died by the end of 1929, and hundreds were falling sick. Ford had already spent over $1.5 million by this stage, with little to show for it. That's around $25 million today. Almost 100 years on, and the graveyard lies in ruins, but you can still make out some of the names. Many died from malnutrition, disease, but also from bites from snakes or vampire bats. In a desperate attempt to clear the rainforest, workers started what some have called perhaps the biggest man-made fire in that part of the Amazon to date.
No había mucho registro del respeto al medio ambiente o de la preservación del medio ambiente. Por lo tanto, el emprendimiento en sí chocó contra la naturaleza, digamos.
But ships continued to travel back and forth from the States, bringing everything, and I mean everything, needed to build an industrial town from scratch. A railroad, prefabricated buildings, this vast water tower that became the tallest man-made structure in the Amazon.
Imagina você conviver naquele momento com água tratada, energia elétrica, salário. Algo inédito para aquele povo. Ninguém sabia o que era salário, porque a maioria vivia de escambo.
Luis Magno was born in Fordlandia and still teaches at the school Ford built for workers' children. His father worked as a supervisor on the rubber plantations. Over time, the forest was cleared and thousands of acres of rubber planted. And by the early 1930s, Fordlandia began to take on the appearance of a Midwestern town, with a central square, sidewalks with fire hydrants, houses with indoor plumbing, and much more.
Hospital de primeira qualidade, clube de lazer, com danceteria, cinema, casas com banheira. E você tinha um campo de golfe com 18 furos, quadra de tênis e uma vila para os executivos, onde você tinha piscina.
This is the swimming pool today. Workers who were married or had larger families were given homes like this. For the American managers, spacious villas with verandas, gardens, and the latest in modern conveniences. Altina da Costa Castro lives in one of them.
Esta mesa aqui é do tempo dos americanos.
She doesn't own the house, but sees herself as a live-in caretaker.
Testeiro sair e ficar abandonado, se acabou todo. Se o povo não tivesse tomado de conta, não existia mais nada, porque roubaram muitas coisas de dentro da casa, entendeu?
She regularly waxes the floors and furniture and carries out repairs to stop the rain getting in.
Quando, ó, você tá vendo, né? Aí, tá caindo a água, funciona.
She says this was the house built for Henry Ford's son, Edsel, in case he ever visited. He did, but never stayed here. And this is the spot where Altina was born. The hospital built by Ford once had X-ray facilities, operating rooms and laboratories, making it one of the most advanced hospitals in the region. Today, a few rusting beds and lamps are all that remain. Edir Branco's parents both came from the local area looking for work. He was born here in 1938.
Meus pais vieram para Forlândia na época que os americanos vieram, aí apareceu muito emprego.
His father was chief mechanic in this workshop in the 1930s. His mother was a nanny for one of the American families.
Meu pai falava que os americanos era na ordem mesmo. Os trabalhadores tinham que chegar no ponto. Metia o cartão, dava o ponto, chegava atrasado, metia não valia mais.
Edir still lives in Fordlandia and works the same lathe his father did. Here he's making a piece to repair a boat engine. For his parents and thousands of others, working for Ford meant not just strict rules on timekeeping, but on pretty much everything. Alcohol was banned and diet was strictly controlled in the company dining hall. Hygiene inspectors would check that homes were kept clean and free from mosquitoes. Even good pay, free healthcare and housing were not enough to retain a loyal workforce. Much to the frustration of the American managers, many simply walked off site and never came back, preferring a simpler life. But while a functioning town was taking shape, the rubber plantation was coming under attack. The fact is that the managers that Ford dispatched knew very little about rubber, or the threat posed by its jungle predators. What they didn't realize was that the plantations of Asia couldn't be replicated in the Amazon. Here, the only way for trees to survive attacks from the native insects, and what's known as leaf blight, is to grow apart, surrounded by other plant species.
Quando você encontra um nativo, você já sabe as pragas que tem naquele local. Quando você cria você não sabe que pragas virão.
But at Fordlandia, the forest was cleared and rubber trees were planted so close together that nothing could stop infestations from jumping from one to the next. Out in the open, they were also vulnerable to the heat of the sun and soil erosion. Then, in December 1930, the workers rioted. They were fed up with the strict working conditions, but most of all the food. A bland diet of oatmeal for breakfast and rice and bread for dinner. When workers were told that they would have to pay for their food out of their own wages, and that they would have to queue instead of receiving table service, all hell broke loose. They destroyed the dining hall, and much of Fordlandia was looted. Many of the Americans ran for their lives into the forest.
Eles simplesmente exigiram que queriam fazer parte de seu cardápio as coisas que estavam acostumados.
Many workers simply left, the rest were fired, leaving only a skeleton workforce of a few hundred. At a time when the Great Depression was gripping the US, Ford rebuilt Fordlandia, determined to see through his vision. By the mid-1930s, leaf blight and bugs had decimated the plantation, at a time when latex should have been on its way back to the factories in Detroit. Ford decided to look elsewhere for a more suitable plantation. A new site was established at Belterra, 70 miles downstream, and Fordlandia was downgraded to a rubber research facility. But both continued to be attacked by a combination of disease, bugs, and caterpillars. Edir remembers collecting them in 1945 as a 7-year-old.
Eu com os colegas se reunia aqui, saía cedinho quando estava de folga da escola e ia catar lagarto. Tinha dois tipos, tinha o charuto, polido assim, e tinha lagartinha pequena, amarela, na casca da seringueira. O Fábio a gente sabia tirar.
Attempts were made to resuscitate the plantations during World War II, but in 1945, Ford's grandson Henry Ford II took the decision to close. By then, the auto giant had invested $20 million in the failed rubber plantations. That's about $400 million today. They were sold to the Brazilian government for less than $250,000. Then one day, the Americans in Fordlandia were gone.
Uma coisa esquisita já. Largaram aí, o mato começou a conta.
Much of Ford's utopia began to fall apart, or was looted. Some, like Edir and Luis's parents, stayed on.
Aí quando eu me empreguei, em 54, tinha 16 anos. Aí o pessoal foram saindo, foram morrendo, e outros colegas também, aí diminuiu o povo aqui. Cadê o pessoal? Tudo bem, aí foi fracassando. O negócio do látex também. Aí parou. Aí botaram criação de gado.
Henry Ford, the master of the motor car, the assembly line and efficiency, had come up against the mighty Amazon and met his match.
Digamos, podía haber sido exitoso, tenían capital, inversiones, maquinaria, ¿no? Tecnología. Yo creo que le faltó esta figura importante, empatizar con los pobladores nativos y empatizar con la región.
Fordlandia has been depicted as a ghost city in the heart of the Amazon, but Luis says over 1,000 descendants of those original Ford workers are still here. His granddaughter is 4th generation Fordlandia, and he's proud of it.
Quantas comunidades, quantos municípios tem na Amazônia? Quem tem uma história tão grande que nem Fordlandia?
But now mining companies are also here.
Você está pisando em dos subsolos mais ricos do Brasil, cobiçados por N empresas. Falando de riquezas minerais que existem aqui, grandiosíssimas.
In 2015, federal prosecutors in Brazil sued the country's architectural heritage agency for failing to preserve Fordlandia. The local head of tourism is hoping it will one day rise again.
A gente sabe que o tombamento ele não vai suprir todas as demandas, não vai resolver tudo, mas eu acredito que é o primeiro passo, o grande primeiro passo, né, para a gente fazer esse processo de busca de recursos para recuperar aqueles bens históricos e assim poder divulgar aquele como um grande atrativo turístico histórico do município de Aveiro e da nossa região do Tapajós.
For now, though, the people of Fordlandia are doing their best to keep the memory of their ancestors and of Henry Ford's jungle dream alive.